The WNBA finals have gotten very, very interesting. Oh, how quickly things can change. We are going to look at the changes or injuries and how this will impact the finals. Will the Aces pay for their gamble, or will they get a Willis Reed moment from CP? I'm going to take a deep dive on this as I just think this game is so fascinating. Game 4 coming up from so many different angles in terms of matchups and everything else. And that's amazing. As first it looked like the Aces were on the verge of cruising easily to a championship. In games 1 and 2, the Aces backcourt just dismantled the Liberty backcourt. The Aces were picking on Sabrina Ionescu and her defense or lack of defense as well. Vandersloot was clearly shaken as she was passing up open shots, and in truth, she just looked old. The only ray of hope was Johannes, who got ridiculously hot in game 1, but like Ionescu, was getting abused on the defensive side of the ball. They only had one player who could play perimeter defense, which was Benaje Laney. And the case for Sandy Brondello was having to choose her poison. Was she going to put Laney on Gray and watch helplessly as Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young just destroyed the other two perimeter players, Vandersloot and Ionescu, or what? The numbers just did not match up. But that's the fun part of this 5-game series, as the Liberty came out and made adjustments after getting crushed in games 1 and game 2, as they put Ionescu on Kiah Stokes. And occasionally she would switch off of her, but this allowed them to put Laney on Jackie Young as well. It allowed them, they switched off Stewart and put her on Chelsea Gray, as they felt her height would give her trouble, and they didn't think Gray could take Stewart off the dribble with her length. And it actually worked as well. They were able to hide Ionescu, as Kiah Stokes could not really do much. Like, she's not much of an offensive threat. I know she went for her 3-point shooting barrage in the opening 2 games, but she's just not a consistent offensive threat, and that worked well. And essentially in game 3, everything went right for the Liberty, which included Jones hitting 3-pointers and Wilson having a slightly below par game for her standards. In truth, even after their loss to the Liberty in game 3, I still would have considered them the odds-on favorite to win the championship. But then, as you are aware, Chelsea Gray pulled up lame at the end of game 3. I have no doubt you've heard the audio of Gray saying something popped in her foot, and then watched her as she needed to be carried in the hallway as she was unable to put weight on her foot. Now, reckless speculation on my part in terms of her injury, but hey, that's what you have to do, as the Aces aren't going to provide any information except to say it's an injured foot. But I suspect she tore her plantar fascia in her foot. The description of that injury, if you can Google it, and says sometimes the sensations are you feel a pop in your arch and experience sharp pain, bruising and swelling and things like that. So I think that's possibly what she did. It's the same injury that Goran Dragic of the Miami Heat sustained when they played the Lakers in the final in the bubble. I think that was in 2020? Yeah, it must have been 2020. And I can't remember if he returned at the end of the series, but he was never the same, as he couldn't move at all. So they might be able to inject this in game 5 and put her out there. I think it's doubtful, and if she is going to be a shell of herself. Now, obviously that is a problem, but now they even have more problems, as Kiah Stokes woke up on Monday morning with a very, very sore foot. She doesn't know how she did it. She just knows she injured it at some point during the game. Again, I suspect it might be something like plantar fasciitis, but who knows? But in truth, the series has totally flipped, and really anything could happen in the next 2 games. Looking at it, it is ironic. The Las Vegas Aces took the ultimate gamble, and the correct gamble, in my opinion. this season going for a top-heavy roster with very little depth. I did a video right after Candace Parker announced she was going to the Aces, and I got into it with somebody in the comment section. I assume it was an Aces fan. I said the only thing that could stop the Aces was injury, and made the point that CP and Gray were very long in the tooth, and this was very risky. Like, if it works out, nobody could beat them. He went after me saying I was wishing for injuries, which I wasn't. I promise I wasn't. But that was the gamble, and I think it was a good gamble. And they have no depth because they've paid so much for their roster, and the hope was that they could get through. And it's unbelievable. They might have just come up one game short. Stokes is out for game 4. She's more likely to play in game 5, but we really don't know the extent of her injury. But is being without Chelsea Gray and CP, is that just too much to lose for them to win? But even more interesting is could the last 2 games set up Candace Parker to be the Willis Reed type hero of Las Vegas against New York? Even better. Don't totally discount this. As I mentioned, CP went out in July with a foot fracture, and she had surgery on her left foot as it was announced on the 25th of July. So she had surgery probably around the 23rd or 22nd, maybe a little bit later. Now she is 12 weeks removed from her surgery on her foot. Again, I am not sure what her injury was. They don't tell us a damn thing. It's just a fracture to her foot. That's all we know. I would speculate and wonder if it was a Jones fracture, because those are notoriously slow to heal, and then they decide to usually do surgery on it. Now, if it is a Jones fracture of the 5th metatarsal, and she obviously had surgery, the people have come back from that injury, in 8 weeks. So CP is 12 weeks post-surgery, so she is a chance. Now, Becky Hammond was asked about the potential of CP playing, and she said this: "I'll have to see if she can suit up, maybe." Now, I suspect this is Hammond just effing with the Liberty and just trying to put that in the back of their mind, as if she was really considering CP playing, I don't see her wanting the Liberty to be aware of it. So I think she's playing mind games with them personally. I don't see CP playing, but you never know. But first, let's go with the more likely scenario that CP doesn't play, or that premise. Then this would leave the Aces with Plum playing the 1, Jackie Young the 2, and I think they'd use Alicia Clark at the 3, and they would act like basically 3 guards. And if this is the scenario, it really gives Plum and Young a chance to shine and show that they are stars in their own right. Plum struggled a bit in last year's final. Young's always been, she has good moments, but her shot has never really been consistent enough until this year. She's been on the steady improve, and man, this is their chance to dominate on a New York stage, and they have potential to do that. That's why it's going to be interesting. Now, as I mentioned, if CP does try to pull a Willis Reed, then she would be at the 4, and then you'd have Wilson at the 5, and man, you've got something to cook with there, and you have serious, I could see them just shocking New York with that lineup. But as I mentioned, I don't see CP playing. I hope I'm wrong, because I want the story. But if not, it will come down to how much can A'ja Wilson dominate, just playing out of her skull. And then at the 4, I think they would go with Australian Kayla George. She's a good international player who's had moments during her career. She can shoot from outside. So she could effectively, if this goes to either game 4 or game 5, I could see her getting hot for 2 games or a single game and just hitting a lot of shots from outside and having the game of her life potentially. I think she would be more likely to get exposed if she had to play consistently in a 5-game series, but in a small 1 or 2 game sample, I think this really gives the Aces a chance, and that's why this series is so enticing. As I said at the outset, anything could happen, and I'm just looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing the matchups. I'm looking forward to seeing if Plum and Young can deliver, or how the matchup between Wilson and Stewart goes, and just what Jones will. It's just delicious, and I can't wait for it. I want your comments below. Tell me what you think I've gotten right or wrong. Your poison's always welcome. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope to see you next time. Good night.